Alrighty folks, I've got a few clips here I want to show you that will kind of remind you of the progression of old Jack here. When we start out, we're just starting out with a halter and makeshift harness, and he's learning all of his basic commands, how to go, how to stop, how to turn left and right. And this is where we start out. Once they learn those commands, we just start dragging. And the drag serves two purposes. They learn that there's something behind them, they learn how to pull, and it builds their strength up.
Yep, up. Oh, yeah, buddy.
The principles of training any animal are consistency and repetition. You just keep doing the same thing the same way every day. And every day you try to refine your cues, you try to refine how you communicate to the animal based upon how they respond to you. And sometimes you just have to let them make a mistake and correct them just to see where they're at. See how well they are getting the program. Once they become consistent in their responses to you and they become somewhat more predictable, you can progress on to the next step. We spent a lot of time just dragging a tire around our homestead, refining our cues, refining his responses to our cues, until I was comfortable moving him on to the next progression of his training, which was hooking him to the chariot and getting him accustomed to the shafts and accustomed to being limited on his ability to move inside those shafts. All in all, the first step of his training went really well. He followed the program really good. Didn't have a whole lot of issues with him. This is the first day we ever put Jack in the shafts, and he learns to cope with things pretty well. Didn't have any issues with him. He knows the basics, how to give to pressure, how to turn, so he just has to work through the limitations of the shafts, learn to turn more square around. As a trainer, you've got to know the limitations of your animal, but you also have to be looking towards getting them better and better at what you're doing. So not overloading them, getting them into situations that you can't get them out of, or where they have no other option but to fight or to quit, is really important. You've really got to take and pay attention that you don't overload your animal mentally, physically, and emotionally. The first session that we drove him may have been about an hour. He's pretty strong. He's been dragging a tire with weight, so the cart was a little heavier, and with the added confinement of the shafts that he had to deal with, it was a pretty good workout for him. Once I think an animal has reached a certain point in my mind, I like to try them out, see what they're capable of. And right here, we had some neighbors come over for a cookout. We hooked up old Prince Jack. It was a really good workout for him. And I wanted to see if he could pull two of us up the little drive here. And he had some issues with it. As soon as I seen he was struggling, we jumped off, drove him on up the hill there without it, got back on the flat, pulled a couple of times like that, but he did really well. Just gave me a really good gauge as to what he's capable of. Here I'm driving some kids around. This is all flat ground, all pretty solid, not real sandy, so he's not having near the trouble. But the kids really enjoyed it. I think I gave 3 different kids rides around our little upper bottom here, just weaving in and out. Really good exercise for him, and plus all the added excitement of the kids and the chatter of the people just make a really well-rounded animal. Here I am just sitting still, and this is just as much a part of training as exercising is.
Howdy guys. It is a stormy type kind of day. Wind's been blowing all day. It's just the way it is here in northern Arizona from about March to the end of May. We call it the sandy season because the wind's blowing sand everywhere. But this afternoon, the storm clouds have kind of built up, and I think the wind has calmed down somewhat. This tire right here is flat on the Chariot. You guys seen in the last video at the end of it there that we've been hooking Prince Jack up to it, and the tire was flat the last time we did it. It was kind of flat, so I'm going to air it up, and we're going to get old Jack hooked up, and we're going to work him out, take him down the road. Right now our biggest thing is trying to teach him to turn square around so that Alan doesn't have to have a 40-acre pasture to drive him in. Some of these places are pretty tight where you have to drive an animal, and they got to be able to turn square around, and that's probably the most challenging part of training a young animal. Teach them to stop, teach them to turn, teach them to drag. Not really that big of a deal. You can pretty much do that with any of them. But when you put them in these shafts and they can't turn their body, no matter how much you prepare them, they have issues with it. So it just takes time, takes a lot of driving, and that's what we're going to do today.
Grooming and tacking up your animal is a vital part of making sure that they stay healthy and looking out for sore spots, looking for things that may be going on with them. I may have mentioned this in another video, but taking care of animals is being watchful and vigilant to their conditions, how they act. And when you groom them and tack them up, you have the opportunity to touch them pretty much all over their whole body, so you can kind of see things that are happening before they really become a problem. You can, when you're bridling them, you can see their teeth and see if they're having any issues, their mouth's getting sore. A lot of behavioral issues stem from animals just not feeling well, having sore spots. And if you can see those and head them off and maybe give them a few days rest, then these issues that they're having with being sore won't cause some bad habits. I've seen a lot of horses in my past and mules also that got sore and they develop bad habits because of it. Here you can see I'm still hobbling Prince Jack to harness him up. It's really a safety concern. It's not that I don't trust Prince Jack, it's that I don't trust any animal. They have their own mind and they're liable to do anything. So just teaching him to stand still and having those hobbles on him really gives me some added peace of mind, so that when I'm harnessing him up or I'm hooking him up to a piece of equipment, he don't take a notion to take off and be half hooked up and could cause him a really bad experience and possibly hurt him. So there's a lot of folks out there that don't like to use hobbles, but I just think they're a vital part of training any animal. It really heads off a lot of problems before they ever start, and once the animal gets consistent, then I'll take and try it one time without it and see what happens, and then just build on that good behavior. And as long as they're standing still and don't have any issues, then I'll hook them up without it. But as young as Prince Jack is right now, I really like having the hobbles on him, because donkeys sometimes are notionable. So just some added safety and security, not only for me, but for him too. I'm trying to protect him at the same time.
Come up. Come up. Go. Whoa. Whoa. Back. Back. Whoa. Easy now. Easy now. Whoa. Stand. Whoa. Easy now. Easy now. Whoa now.
Unexpected stops, changes in your routine are really good for these young animals. They don't kind of get into the habit of stopping in the same places and doing the same things. I'm consistent in how I ask and what I'm asking, But as far as routines, when you have a draft animal, you never know where you're going to have to stop. You never know what you're going to be faced with when you get out there and start driving around. So putting them in different positions and taking them to different places is really good for their mind. Right here, he couldn't turn right there, so I had to back him up. And he kind of got to a spot there where he didn't want to, so I used a little bit of rhythmic pressure on the rein right here to get him to go ahead and back up. He knew what I was asking. He just didn't want to do it.
Step left.
And away we go. I will apologize for the wind, but I really wanted you guys to hear my commands. I'm going to be driving him up the road and back down the road, and I want you guys to be able to hear me, so I apologize about the wind. My tripod about fell over as we were trotting down through there, so I went and got a different camera mount. Got my camera mounted just a little bit lower, but I think it'll give you a really good view of the different things that I'm going to explain as we go along. Right here we're headed downhill, and you can see the chariot come forward. The britchen's holding the chariot back, and it's really important not to have your britchen too tight, but you don't want it loose at the same time to where it's going to move back and forth and begin chafing his hindquarters. Here we're driving out on the road, and we're going to go about 1.5 miles up the road here. Like I mentioned before, Jack, once he gets out there, he really likes to go. He's still a young animal, so he has a few issues with staying where you put him. We call it tracking. He doesn't track well. He likes to wander right here. I gave him the opportunity to just go straight, and he wandered to the left. And now he's doing pretty good. I have to constantly tell him to come back to the right, but that's just part of any young horse. That's what happens when you first start out, whether you're riding. Anybody rides colts knows it's hard to keep them tracking. And here we're at the top of the hill. The topography changes in elevation here coming north of our homestead.
Step right.
So it gets pretty hilly.
Step right.
So he slowed down. Here we're coming into, we've been about 1.5 miles up the road. Now we're coming back into our driveway, and it's really sandy. One of the things you can expect with a young animal is they're going to weave back and forth as they pull, particularly when the load gets heavy and the ground gets sandy. So now we're down here in the our lower bottom. I've driven around here, and we've got some trails which are really good for switching up. They're kind of tight turns, so I can go from left to right. I've got a couple places here that I can turn him more square around as I progress.
Step left. Good lad, that. Step right. Good lad, that. Step right. Step right. Hey, step right. Step right.
As I am working here, I am slowly progressing his turns, teaching him to turn just a little tighter and a little tighter until he turns square around. I don't like to just go straight into turning square around with young animals. Even after they know how, I'll make wider turns. As you can see here, he's kind of struggling with his hip against one shaft and his shoulder against the other.
Step right.
And
Step right.
what he needs to learn to do is do what we call a two-track, where his outside hind reaches farther up and under his body. Right there's a good example. And sometimes they can get sore. Their hip will get sore, their shoulder will get sore from kind of rubbing on the shafts, but he has to learn to turn square around. Just have to be on the lookout for him getting sore.
Good lad, that.
But as he progresses, he gets better and better. And as he gets freer in his turning, and he's two-tracking better here, he's kind of two-tracking a little bit better, turns more square around. I can start checking him with the outside line and kind of slowing down that side of his body. If you look at it like turning a boat, I'm slowing down the right side of his body or his left side of his body so the other side can be move a little faster and he can turn more square around. Hope that makes sense. It's kind of like a neck rein on a horse. So that's what I'm doing here. Just kind of trying to get him to turn more square around, step up under his self more with his outside hind leg. We did quite a bit of that down there in the bottom. I come up to the house and I was going to show Miss Polly how well he's doing. So she was down here at the camper. So I drove him up in there. It's a pretty tight little area. And you'll see here he kind of struggles with it, but you can see he's really stepping up and under himself with that outside hind, stepping up and across with his outside foreleg. And he did really, really well there. Really, really good workout session. Really like the progression of his turns. He's just doing super, super good. He just needs more of it. All right, folks, wind's blowing around this trailer. Hopefully I'm out of the wind enough that y'all can hear me. Hope y'all enjoyed that training with Prince Jack. It was fun. He did really well. He's learning to turn square around pretty good. It's gonna take him a while yet, but he's doing all right. So, that being said, I'm gonna end it up. Thank y'all for stopping by. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, be not weary in well doing, for in due season you shall reap, if you faint not. We'll see you later.